Hi, and welcome back to Grade 8 Math, Unit 5, Section 1, Understanding Percents. This is Lesson 2, and the second of 3 videos for this lesson, which will review the skills you learned in previous years to change between fractions, decimals, and percents. In this video, we will review how to write a fraction and a percent when given a number in decimal form. So let's get started. To express a decimal as a fraction, we can imagine the decimal number as a fraction with a denominator of 1. For example, 0.342 can be written as a fraction by simply writing a denominator of 1. When I look at that fraction, however, I see a problem because we can't have a decimal within a fraction. To get rid of that decimal, I would need to move that decimal place 3 places to the right. That is essentially the same thing as multiplying by 1,000. And if I multiply by 1,000 on the top, I have to multiply by 1,000 on the bottom. That gives us 342 over 1,000. As with any fraction, we must always make sure that our fractions are in lowest terms. When I look at 342 and 1,000, the only number that's common between the two is 2. So 2 is our greatest common factor. When I divide the numerator and the denominator by 2, I get 171 over 500. For 2.5, I could also write this as a fraction by putting a 1 underneath. However, once again, we can't have this decimal in our fraction. So I would need to move that decimal 1 place to the right. That is essentially the same as multiplying by 10. And if I multiply by 10 on the top, I have to multiply by 10 on the bottom. That gives me 25 over 10. I then say that the greatest common factor for 25 and 10 is 5. So if I divide the numerator by 5 and I divide the denominator by 5, I will get 5 over 2. 5 1/4. 5 1/4 is the same as 5.25. I can write that as a fraction by saying 5.25 over 1. However, again, I can't have a decimal within a fraction. So to get rid of that decimal, I must move the decimal 2 places to the right, which is essentially the same as multiplying by 100. And if I multiply by 100 on top, I must multiply by 100 on bottom. That will give me 525 over 100. Looking at 525 and 100, I can identify my greatest common factor as 25. So I divide the numerator and the denominator by 25, and I get 21 over 4. To express a decimal as a percent, I do the same thing. For example, 0.17. I can write that as a fraction by simply writing a denominator of 1. Keeping in mind that percent means out of 100, then my goal should be to get 100 on the bottom. So if I multiply by 100 on the bottom, then I would also multiply by 100 on the top. Multiplying by 100 on the top shifts that decimal place 2 places to the right. So I get 17 over 100. Remember that any number out of 100 means that that is the percentage. So 17 out of 100 is 17%. 2.28. I can write that as a fraction by writing 1 as the denominator. Again, if I want to get a percentage, I have to try and get it out of 100. So I multiply by 100 on the bottom, and I multiply by 100 on the top. That means my decimal will shift 2 places to the right. I get 228 over 100. Any number out of 100 means that that is the percentage. So that becomes 228%. 0.035 I can write as a fraction by simply writing a 1 underneath. Again, to get a percent, I should have a denominator of 100. So I multiply by 100 on the bottom, and I multiply by 100 on the top. Multiplying by 100 on the top, my decimal will shift 2 places to the right. So that becomes 3.5 out of 100. And again, any number over 100 is the percentage. So 3.5 over 100 means I have 3.5%. There is a trick that we can use when changing between percents and decimals, sometimes known as the Dr. Pepper method. The D stands for decimals, and the P stands for percents. And essentially, it's just a quick way for us to remember the direction in which the decimal moves when changing from decimals to percents, or percents to decimals. When changing from a decimal to a percent, we would multiply by 100. So essentially, we would move the decimal place 2 places to the right. When we change from a percent to a decimal, we would divide by 100, which essentially means move the decimal 2 places to the left. So if I wanted to change the decimal 0.0576 into a percent, I could use this method and just say that it was 2 places to the right, and therefore 2 places to the right would give me 5.76%. And if I gave you 63.42% and I asked you to write that as a decimal, I could use this method and say, well, to go from percents to decimals will be 2 places to the left, and I'd put my pencil on my decimal and I would move that decimal 2 places to the left to get 0.6342. Please proceed to the next video in this lesson.